The Saturday Morning Snap is a one-stop fantasy shop, bringing weekly news and advice in under an hour. I'm Mackenzie Tout, joined by Landon Monula. Welcome to the podcast. We are back. Live on Apple Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or however you may be listening. We want to welcome you into the show. It's Saturday, October 13th. It is the 23rd episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, and we're actually coming to you in the afternoon today, thanks to Landon. No,
I apologize for that. No. It's my fault. I was too busy drinking German beer, eating some Wiener Schnitzel, playing some drinking games. I went to Kitchener, the second largest Oktoberfest festival in the world, from what I understand, and it was quite a good time. I'm surprisingly feeling pretty good this morning though, or this afternoon.
Listen, the people that listen to this show need to know that there's two things that you just can't stay away from: good beer and juicy wieners.
Schnitzel, the Wiener Schnitzel.
I was not too available myself. I had a lot going on this week.
New job, new high school. Congrats, man.
Yeah, changing schools this coming week. So packing up my life this week. I actually went in this morning to school and got some stuff done. So anyways, been a busy week, but we're ready to go right now. And we have a special guest with us.
Yeah, just in case, just to take over my job if I keep on drinking too much beer and
buddy, you're on notice.
Working late nights. This whole serving gig is really cramping our podcasting style.
Yeah, you need to apologize. Like I apologized to Joe Mixon last week. You need to apologize to the listeners now.
Well, I guess this is a dress rehearsal for Mr. Taylor.
Yes, that's right.
See how good he does. See how his hot takes. If it's a little too hot, I don't know if he'll be allowed back. How you doing, Taylor?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Excellent.
Taylor's a longtime listener, a really good friend of mine, childhood friend, pretty much do everything together. So, good to have him on the show finally. He listens weekly, always giving feedback. And so it's nice to have him on the podcast. It's been a long time coming.
Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how your fantasy teams are doing, what your life goals are. Give us an update.
I also started a new job this week in Toronto.
So nice. Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Fantasy wise, not looking too good. Both leagues, I'm 0-5 in.
We steered you in the wrong direction, obviously.
Yeah, but I'm kind of starting to look towards next year, looking to gather some picks in early rounds and see what I can do.
Yeah, you sold off early.
Yeah.
On the Zeke trade with Landon, of course. Fucking snake.
But Zeke didn't end up doing anything last week, so.
Yeah. You sold off early, but looking forward to next year, you've got a first, two firsts, 2 thirds, and you're trying to get more.
Yeah.
So your team next year could be serious.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have a couple decent keepers in mind. So he's looking to next year, but he's got some good things to say for the remainder of this year. So what do you think about, let's jump into the recapping last week. What do you think about the Eagles and Giants matchup? To be completely honest with both of you, it's not the way that I saw this matchup going. I actually thought the Giants would have a good chance to win, and that was horrendously wrong.
I liked our good friend Andy Holloway tweeted out that Saquon is good as Eli is bad.
Correct.
And it's amazing.
On opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's amazing how everyone has something, their 2 cents to put in, right? We're seeing exactly why the Giants drafted Saquon where we did, and we saw exactly why they should have drafted a quarterback. And I've been preaching that for a few weeks now, and we talked about it in our draft episodes. It was hard to watch. What did you think about the game, Taylor? Did you catch it all?
Yeah, I caught a good portion of it. I mean, it's pretty obvious, I think, going forward that they're going to be looking to have Saquon as their franchise player. and probably look to replace
Eli
that quarterback moving forward.
Holy smokes. The thing that I've talked with a couple people about, you specifically, Landon, and a couple other guys at work, but had the Giants drafted Sam Darnold instead of Saquon Barkley, would they be any better this year?
And I don't think they would be, but they would have at least
they would have that position going forward.
Correct. And now going the way they're going, they might have a top 3 pick again. So really, in the end, it might work out for them. If they get a top end quarterback next year's draft and they have another terrible season, then it was maybe all worthwhile. They get the next future of their franchise. But this year, it would have been a tough year for Saquon, and everyone's getting 1 year older, Odell Beckham and all that. Yeah. But they signed Odell to a big contract. They have Saquon locked up for several years, and if they draft a franchise quarterback that can take over from Eli next year, they are now they'd be more like the Kansas City Chiefs type of offense.
Right. There's 2 pieces to the puzzle there that I think are just not working right now. One, Eli's bad. It's very apparent. You can see how frustrated Pat Shurmur is on the sideline. I think some people have said, his play calling has been bad. I don't know if his play calling has been overly terrible. It's certainly not like Matt Nagy, it's not creative, it's not dynamic, but I'm sure he's not calling, 14 checkdowns in a row to Saquon Barkley. And if you own Saquon, you loved it.
That's Eli.
But I think, that's Eli. He's panicked, and he's into this bad habit of just making 1 or 2 reads and then throwing to, the 4 or 5 yard pass for Saquon to do his thing. That's a problem. The O-line is a problem.
That's what I do blame him with that O-line.
I do blame him, though, because even though it breaks down, if you look at guys like Aaron Rodgers, who has a terrible O-line, Carson Wentz the other night is a good example. He scrambles. Even Dak Prescott, he scrambles. They find holes, they extend plays, and they make things happen. Eli doesn't have that, man.
He can't move. No, he's physically
he looks a lot older than he is. I went to check on his age the other day, and I was like, this guy's 33? What?
In the year when the 40-year-old quarterbacks are having record-setting seasons like Drew Brees, right, and how Brady's still the GOAT, it's hard to watch Eli just struggle.
Yeah, to go back to that Darnold or Barkley argument, I don't know if they'd be any better. Right. I don't know if Darnold's the guy moving forward that's your franchise, but Saquon is, oh my goodness, he is so good. Yep. If I could go back and redraft, Saquon would be in the top 3 for me.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what he can do.
This season.
Oh my God, he's ridiculous, and you can't trade for him because it's like trying to trade for Gurley or Kamara. No, good luck.
The best stat I heard was that I think it was a screen pass. The expected yardage was supposed to be about 15 yards. He took it for 55 yards. You could see just the Eagles around him. It's like chasing. It's like he's playing flag football out there.
I watched a couple guys tackle him and attempt. That's better. Attempt to tackle him, and then their teammates came in at 4 or 5 yards later and got him down. And you just see them getting up and they're shaking their heads. They're like, "What do I have to do to get this guy to the ground?" That one run, he hurdled 2 guys in 4 yards and then lowered his shoulder as his left foot hit the ground and got another 3. It's dumb how good he is. Yeah. So pairing off of Eli, I think I'm going to steal your question.
Yeah.
What does this mean for Odell Beckham?
That's the question everyone has. So at this point, I had him valued so high early on this season. I thought it was a comeback year. Didn't expect Eli to be this bad or their O-line to be this bad. But is he a top 10 fantasy wide receiver? Him and AJ Green, how do you think AJ finishes better rest of season, or do you think he kind of comes back and maybe is a top? It's hard to put him in the top 5 because he's so far behind already now for some of these wide receivers.
If you look back at the stats, if you put this into perspective, Odell Beckham Jr. so far this year has played 6 games, 3 of them over 100 yards, and the other 3 are this was his worst game. 5 for 44 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 were like in the 60s and 70 yards, just no touchdowns. Last week he had his only receiving touchdown and he had a passing touchdown, right? So last week you saw a little bit of an inflation for what you usually get, but AJ Green also had a 3 touchdown game in the first half. So that's also just an anomaly for the season. I would rather have Odell. Things really can't get much worse, like truly. I don't know. I'd like to think if Odell's catching punt returns, he has the capability to take a couple back. So that's an added bonus for him. But you can't. I think this is a buy low opportunity on Odell Beckham Jr. You can't panic sell him because that's
still a buy low.
Yeah, buy low for sure. You can't sell him. I wouldn't. I would hold on to him. He's going to win you weeks. But
And looking at his schedule, so we'll talk.
oh my God, they have a great slate coming up.
Atlanta, Washington, which is going to be a fun Josh Norman watch. Their bye week, San Francisco, Tampa Bay. They have Philadelphia again, and that might be a get-right game for the Giants. I think they have a chance, especially after some good matchups, to improve their kind of morale in the team, at least offensively, to come back and give Philadelphia a good run for their money. So yes, I agree. I think it's still a buy low opportunity for Odell, and it has been since the beginning of the season, except for last week, I guess.
Yeah. We are on Instagram at Saturday Morning Snap and on Twitter at Mac_SMS and Landon_SMS. You can keep up with us on social there. We're going to jump into the weekly matchups segment here.
Weekly matchups.
And we're going to start with the Seahawks and Raiders. Is that what you want to do? You want to jump across the pond?
Yeah, tough games. We want to highlight a little bit of some tougher matchups where you might have your struggling starting guys, how comfortable you feel, those wide receiver 3s, running back 3s, guys you don't want to start, but you have to if you have no choice, injuries, whatever it is. So, yeah, it should be what's that stat earlier you heard, Mac, about London games?
Yeah, 8 of 12 London games so far have produced more than 47 points. And so they typically have a high over-under. I want to know if you guys forecast the same thing, and I guess I'll position that to Taylor, because when we were looking at the lines for this game, Seahawks are favored. They're both on the road because this is in London, but they're both they're both road teams. But the Seahawks are favored by 2.5. Over under is fairly average, 48.5 points. So it's just over that 47 point mark. So do you think they meet it, and do you think the Seahawks are actually favorites?
I personally don't think the Seahawks are favorites. I mean, if I was going to go pro line or anything on this game, I would go Raiders. Now, a lot of that is going to be dependent on whether Derek Carr can show up and get the ball to his receivers, Jordy or anybody else. But you also have Marshawn Lynch in case he doesn't show up, who has been producing well this year.
Really good.
I was actually surprised by. I thought he'd do well, but not as well as he has been doing, especially for his age. And
I totally doubted Marshawn. I think that's a good take. You saw 2 weeks ago, Derek Carr came out and had an unbelievable game, 400 yards passing. Was it 3 or 4 TDs? He had a great week. Amari Cooper had a good week, and then last week they kind of fell flat. But Marshawn was that sort of needle in the haystack that was, worthy of playing. Seahawks have some question marks. Run game, is it Carson, Davis, Penny? I think you have to lean Carson, but Davis is going to be factored in. Penny's probably not going to be a factor. And then there's question marks with Doug Baldwin, certainly, and how involved Tyler Lockett will be if Baldwin's going to get a bigger workload. So I don't know. I have some hesitations about this game. I think both teams have a tendency to struggle offensively, but then again, you get some really weird games like last week. This is very typical of the Rams and the Seahawks. They tend to have game scripts that you just can't predict, and the Seahawks boat raced the Rams to a last minute 33-31 victory. With 2 minutes left, the Seahawks were winning 31-30. Yeah. And the Rams marched down and kicked a deep field goal to win. But I don't know. It's one of those matchups where you just kind of don't know what you're going to get. I could see this going over the 47-point mark, and I think there's a lot of guys that are worthy of a start here, but I don't know. What do you think, Landon?
I think this is a get-right game for Russell Wilson. I think all the owners are just obviously, and rightfully so, disappointed with Russell and how he's performed. He hasn't run it all this year. But he hasn't had Doug Baldwin there, his main man, Dougie, to throw to. Last week, Doug was on the field the entire game, only had one reception, one target for 1 yard, I think it was. So I think Russell makes it happen with his legs. Tyler Lockett's involved. I think the running backs are still fairly involved. Yeah, I like all parties on the Seahawks side, and I'm not scared of the Seahawks defense, and I would. No. I'm obviously hesitant to start Amari Cooper, but if you have him and you probably drafted him and you've seen him go yo-yo up and down throughout every week, or I guess he's had quite more low weeks than good weeks.
More low than up, yeah.
This should be a good week. It should be a bounce back week for Cooper. So,
what about Jordy Nelson?
He didn't draft him to be an every week starter, but I think he's a better DFS play.
Okay.
Maybe stack with Derek Carr, or he's going to be a low owned, low started guy. So I think that's more I would lean. I don't feel comfortable starting him in your seasonal leagues.
And what about Martavis Bryant?
No, still no dice on Martavis.
Quick news on Martavis Bryant. He, traveling to London on the flight, had come down with an illness. I don't know if it was, onboard like motion sickness or whatever the case may be, but he was added to a late add to the injury report as being ill. So I think he'll play. I think he's just traveling, but
yeah, he had 91 yards last week, so it was his best week as a Raider, and. Yeah,
I wouldn't chase the points on him.
No, he still only had 3 targets, 3 receptions. That was it. So,
big game preview of the week. We've got the Steelers at the Bengals, a divisional matchup that usually poses a really, really good game. Bengals actually favored at home by 1.5. It's really a pick'em game. So usually the home team gets a 3-point edge. Steelers have taken away 1.5 on that. So this should be a very good and close game. Over under 52.5, one of the higher ones on the week. Not quite as high as the Chiefs Patriots, which we'll get into a little bit, but this should be a good game. I could see it going over the over under. So I know Taylor is a fan of a couple Bengals. So who do you want to speak to first on that Bengals side?
I think Tyler Boyd's going to have a pretty big game. I mean, Steelers are obviously a great team. They have huge offensive weapons with your Antonio Brown, and Big Ben can still get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Pittsburgh's defense has just been a little too susceptible to the passing game this year, and I think Tyler Boyd's going to have a huge game. Andy Dalton is, in my opinion, I think is probably going to torch their defense a little bit. I mean, they'll probably end up being a close game, but I think the Bengals will pull it out. They'll probably end up getting higher on that over-under than what's projected.
I agree. The Steelers have been they haven't been good defensively this year. They have a lot of holes in their defense. I'm going to talk about CJ Uzama in starts of the week. Just a little spoiler there, but they've been really bad against the tight end. Joe Mixon is, if you heard last week's episode when I gave the man my apology, he's been amazing in the 3 weeks that they've had him. And Joe, don't you dare go and let me down after I apologize, because I will go back in the opposite direction just as fast as I came, or quicker than I came to your side. So, but no, there's a lot of good things. I think AJ Green obviously demands attention, but you've got guys like Tyler Boyd, like CJ Uzama to step in and sort of fill those pockets. And I think there's going to be lots of them. Tyler Boyd, like Taylor said, weeks 2 through 5, 6 for 91, 6 for 132, 11 for 100. In that 11 reception game, he had 15 targets. It's amazing to see. Last week's game was a little bit, of a different trend that we had seen. only 7 targets for 44 yards. But the potential is there in a really big, high-scoring game. And so I do like a lot of guys on the Bengals side of the ball.
Yeah, for DFS purposes, because Tyler Boyd let everyone down, he was chalk last week. I think he's a great pivot play this week as just the numbers you said. I don't think those are going to go away, especially against the susceptible Pittsburgh defense. So I completely agree with Taylor. With you guys. Tyler Boyd should be a good start unless you have a bunch of studs on your team before him.
Yeah. Week 7 bye next week for the Steelers. Now, what do you project for James Conner? Is this his last week as the starter in Pittsburgh? If you own him, what do you do with him? Do you hold on and hope that Le'Veon Bell gets traded, or do you sell him now for anything that you can get your hands on?
If you own, best case scenario is that you handcuff Lev Bell with all of his uncertainty early on. If you own them both, don't sell either. And then if for some reason Lev Bell gets traded. What if you're
just the Connor owner?
That's the big key, right? If you're just the Connor owner, man, oh man, I don't know. At this point, if you sell him, I would just hang on to him. I'm not going to sell him. I'm going to hang on to him and take the gamble that he's worthless in 2 weeks.
Would you sell James Conner for like a John Brown or an Emmanuel Sanders or something like that?
Depends on your needs at the position, but if you have 2 or 3 good running backs and you had Conner at the back of your bench to start the year and you picked him up off waivers and dropped your second tight end or something, yeah, you could sell him as high as you can. It's and try to do it to the Lev Bell owner because he's probably 1 in 4 or whatever, and it might be tough.
Steelers side of the ball, you're starting Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. What about Vance McDonald or Jesse James?
For me, I think it's a bounce back week for the Vance. I'll do the Vance stance this week. I think he's gonna. It's hard. The tight end positions, like we've talked about all season long, it's such a dumpster fire, and you got to stick with the talent, how Big Ben uses his tight ends, and just hope he gets some yardage.
Taylor, you like Vance McDonald, Jesse James, or neither?
Probably Vance McDonald. I'm not. I was liking James earlier in the season, but I think he just doesn't have the consistency for me to risk having him in that position. So. Yeah,
he kind of comes and goes. For me, it's the big playability Jesse James kind of lacks. You saw Vance McDonald take that, I can't remember what the yardage was, but it was a huge play to the end zone. And he gives you 2 weeks worth of points at the tight end position on a big play like that.
Big stiff arm to the
yes, that's
he
right.
Threw that Bucks player into IR. Honestly,
but it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game.
It's also going to be frustrating to own a guy like Vance McDonald, but that's what it's like with every tight end. Like unless you have the
predicting
big three,
the week, yeah.
Last week even Gronk let you down, but it happens to every position. There's not one position, including Alvin Kamara, that doesn't let you down a week.
Stop! Don't do that. Don't.
Probably when you need him most.
I lost my matchup last week in Gridiron Tradition, the league that us three are in together, or one of the leagues us three are in together. I needed 9.8 points from Alvin Kamara on the Monday night to secure a victory over one of the better teams in our league, and he gave me 5.5. Man,
I know. We were recording as the game was going on, so
I know, and I was like, I only need. He gave me like 3 in the first half. I'm like, oh, they're just giving Kamara a break, and Ingram's just kind of doing his thing. They're getting him back involved, and it was like, no, our Mark Ingram all game.
Yeah.
The people, I just need to say this. For the people that have reached out to me this week on Twitter or SleeperBot and said, yo, what do I do with Alvin Kamara? You keep him, you idiot. Don't go selling him.
Hey.
Oh my God.
Our listeners.
No, it's not our listeners. It's Our listeners are smarter than that. It's people that I've been interacting with on Sleeper,
Right.
who clearly don't listen to this podcast yet. But you can't. It's a one bad game. The guy literally carried the offense for 2017 and for the first 4 weeks of this season. So give the guy a break. He's probably worn out. Mark Ingram came back in and showed what he could do for the offense and proved what his value is. So
Just like
give
we
Kamara
projected.
a break. Give Kamara a break.
Absolutely. He single-handedly got you wins the first 4 weeks. So chill.
Two games over 35 points, 38 and 43 in half-point leagues in 2 of his weeks, and the other 2 were like 16 and 25. So cool it on Alvin Kamara. Don't trade him. Hold on to him. You're an idiot if you sold him.
Well, that last game was more about Drew Brees anyways.
Yeah, it was all about Drew Brees, man. Like, they didn't need Alvin Kamara.
No.
And that's part of football. Like, that's where you have to separate real football from fantasy expectations. Like, when a team is up 40-13, yes, it'd be great to see Alvin Kamara on the field, but they don't need Alvin Kamara on the field. I'm surprised that Drew Brees was in as long as he was.
Yep.
I know.
Because you're risking injuries at that point to a team that you're just whooping and clearly are frustrated. Drew Brees is doing his thing. Michael Thomas is still on the field. Mark Ingram's still on the field. Teddy Bridgewater got the ball with 2 minutes left to go kneel it 3 times. Yeah. Like, it wasn't necessary. But again, Alvin Kamara wasn't needed, and they basically gave him 2 weeks of rest to get right for the rest of the season. Exactly. So probably a smart move. You can't sit Alvin Kamara in that situation because there was tons of scoring. They just didn't need him. So just give him a break. Give him a pass.
When you're looking at games and Bonanza games, guys, you want to start. It's not a bad idea to get away from the big spreads, because what happened last night or on Thursday night, Philadelphia and the Giants, the Giants gave up. They weren't throwing the ball late. They weren't trying to get Odell more and more touches, and it was almost like they gave up. And same with Philly. They didn't have to push the ball even more. So I know you weren't disappointed with really anyone on that team, but those big, the Arizona-Minnesota game, that's a 10-point. The Buffalo-Houston game, big 10-point. If you project them closer than what Vegas is, then maybe you can roll it. But this week's actually looking pretty good. They're all about 4, 3-point, 2.5-point. The LA Rams and Denver game could be a blowout. The Rams could just go absolutely nuts, and then you're kind of pooched at the fantasy output.
Yeah. Another big game on the schedule this week. We've got the Chiefs at the Patriots. Patriots 3.5-point favorites despite hosting the 5-0 Kansas City Chiefs. Over-under in this game is 59.5.
Wowza.
Taylor, as an ex-Patriots fan, give us the rundown on this game. Who do you like? Who do you think is going to win? And do you think they'll meet that over-under?
I think they will meet the over-under. I think they'll potentially exceed it, actually.
Yeah.
Tom Brady's Tom Brady. The Patriots are who they are for a reason. However, the Chiefs are really showing something this year. And if I had to pick somebody, I think I'm going to go for the Chiefs to win this game.
Oh,
I know, it's Patriots are the Patriots for a reason, but I think Mahomes is going to come out and, he has too many weapons, and the Patriots just, I don't know. They haven't really shown to be themselves. I know it's a big game for them to show that, but I don't know if they do that against the Chiefs.
It has been one of those years where, again, slow defensive start for the Patriots. They did this last year. They're certainly improving on the offensive end, so I can see where the narrative supports, 30 apiece or more type scoring game, slug it out till someone scores the last touchdown. I could certainly see that narrative presenting itself, but I actually am going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum here. I think this is a chance for the Patriots to step up and say, look, this is our league. We're still the team to beat. Don't mess around and come onto our field 5-0 and think that this is an easy game. Tom Brady's going to be slinging it. He's got Edelman back, who looked good last week. They need to use Gronk more. Josh Gordon could stretch the field. Hopefully he's not on a snap count. And James White and Sony Michel are going to go bananas this week. So I would start every single Patriot offensive player minus Chris Hogan. Because I think when you look at Gronk, Edelman, Gordon, White, and Michel, they're all going to get targeted before Hogan. And I think that Brady would rather throw the ball downfield to Gordon than Hogan. And if that option's not available, he has no problem calling plays for James White over the middle, Gronk in the slot, Edelman in the slot. Those are better options than throwing it downfield to Chris Hogan. He's looked terrible this year, and I don't think that he has really any more value. I would consider cutting him without a second thought at this point in the season.
Hogan must be one of the biggest disappointments, injury unrelated.
I'll cue up the Price is Right disappointing sound here.
Absolutely. He was picked so high. He's got a great offense. Tom Brady still has it. And he just hasn't been involved. It's not like he has the case of the drops or anything. It's just he's not targeted. Brady's not really looking for him. I guess New England's offense disappointed a little bit early on. A couple tough losses, but still, it's a tough go for Chris Hogan at this point in his or in the season, anyways.
Right. Yeah. Chief side of the ball, anybody that you're sitting, because I think most of the players on that side are startable as well, if not all.
I would go definitely the two. You start the entire week without a doubt. I would start Sammy Watkins as well. I start Kareem Hunt, and then obviously Pat Mahomes is an absolute stud. But that's where I leave off. I don't know if there's anyone starting Albert Wilson.
He said that. Oh, yeah. What about this is kind of gross. What about Spencer Ware?
What about Travis Kelce? No, I'm just kidding. Start Travis Kelce.
Spencer he's kind of good at football.
He's still just a handcuff. This game should be too competitive, like you guys were saying. You guys are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Too competitive to they're not going to be running out the clock. Kareem Hunt's not going to get a break. It's going to be one of those games, hopefully, that it'll come down to whoever has the ball last. And
yeah.
Now, one thing I will say, both defenses have come on strong these past couple weeks. So
it's not going to be a defensive battle, though.
I'm just saying they both have gotten better. I do think that it's going to go over the 59.5 points, but I don't know. I would almost take the under, honestly, just because the defense. Yeah, I would take the under. But I get it's 2 versus 1. I get that.
Yeah. Vegas seems to think the opposite. Yeah. Before we go, who wins, Chiefs or Patriots? You got to pick a side.
I'll go Chiefs.
Oh, you dog. If you were looking for a weekly matchup featuring the Saints or Lions, we don't have one this week because they're on bye. So sit your Saints and Lions. Just a little friendly PSA there.
Starts of the week.
So let's get into our starts of the week. We've got some really juicy ones this week. Where do you want to start? Quarterback, running back, wide receiver?
Yeah, let's go through them quick because we have 3 sets of starts of the week this year with the honorary list of Taylor, his additions. I'll speak quickly to my quarterback start of the week, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton so far this year, his finishes as a quarterback so far this year, 2-1-2-1-2. Pattern suggests a QB1 this week. He's only owned in 75% of the in 75% of leagues, so he should be available for some of you. And we kind of predict maybe the Bengals go ahead and get this victory in a high-scoring game. So I love Andy Dalton. I love his weapons that he has. He should be great. Might throw a pick or two. It happens in divisional games. But I really like Andy Dalton to be a quarterback 1 this week.
I like that. That's a great pick. My quarterback start of the week, because mine was taken by Taylor, is going to be Baker Mayfield, and
That was so nice of you to give him yours.
We've been a fan of Baker Mayfield on this podcast since the get-go, and against the LA Chargers should be a great matchup. Joey Bosa did not make the trip to Cleveland. They're going to be at home. I think this is going to be a great game. You start Njoku, you start Landry. I think it's going to be a good matchup for everyone. I think Duke Johnson could get some work out of the backfield, and this could be a sneaky little shootout. I would take the over on this game. And I like Baker. And his fantasy points, he has some running capability. So I think the over-under is 46 points. Cleveland's actually favored by 1 point. And I would still take LA to win, but I think it's going to be a shootout.
So let's say you have Rivers and Mayfield on your team. Who would you start, Rivers or Mayfield?
Oh, Cleveland's defense is better, but I still like Rivers just because of his weapons. I do think Keenan Allen is better than Landry.
Okay.
Rivers has the experience, and that's really the only reason. But I think it's going to be close. I wouldn't put Rivers too far ahead of Baker, I don't think.
Mayfield or Luck?
I would almost go Mayfield. I don't feel great about Luck this week.
Mayfield or Carr?
Mayfield.
Okay. Mayfield or Dalton?
I like Dalton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Taylor, speak to us about your start of the week.
So my start of the week at quarterback is Jameis Winston coming in for his first start of the year. Look, everybody saw how the season started off for them. Fitzmagic went absolutely crazy for the first 3 weeks. It was
ridiculous.
We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Week 4 struggled. Winston ended up coming in. I think Fitzmagic finished with like 3 points or something.
Threw a couple picks. It was kind of ugly, but Jameis was okay, but not a ton better.
And they had their bye week. He's coming in looking to be like, look, I am your number one. There's no doubt about it. So I think he's going to be looking to shell out big time this week.
I like that. And I think, I should let Landon speak to it, but I think when Fitzmagic comes in and shows what this offense is capable with the right approach at quarterback, I think Jameis is capable of replicating that, and it shows you, it proves to you that it's possible. So there's no real question marks. It's just, let's see it, right?
Absolutely.
I'll put one in at the running back position. I debated between two names. I'm going to go officially with Tevin Coleman as my running back start of the week because Devonta Freeman is banged up, ruled out for week 6, and this is bad for Freeman owners, but great for Coleman owners. Look, the Falcons and the Bucks, this game is going to be a high-scoring game. Neither defense is good. It's like Swiss cheese out there. So I don't dislike any Buck or Falcon start of the week here, but I think Tevin Coleman is going to be involved in the run game, the passing game. I could see where Ito Smith maybe vultures a goal line touchdown. It's happened before, but I think his workload should be huge. My second start of the week honorable mention would be James White for the same reasons. The passing work that he's going to get in that game against the Chiefs, I think, is going to be substantial and enough to make a huge difference in his weekly total just in receptions.
I love both picks, Mac. Tevin Coleman should they both have a great matchup, and it's amazing how the rule of thumb. Let's put a reminder in for next year. The Patriots running back to always buy is the cheapest one. Always. Whatever it is, I don't care how many there are. Just draft the cheapest because he always seems to work out, like Deion Lewis was last year. And James White this year, and it costs you the least. So just a little mental note for next season when we're drafting Patriots running backs. So my start of the week at the running back position is a guy no one really wants to feel good about. You may have sold him. I hope you didn't because you couldn't get much for him after his really down week. But that's Jordan Howard. And the big thing about Jordan Howard, Miami gives up tons of points, the pass catching running back, and running backs in general. And Jordan Howard works on that. I think it's going to be his. I know Tariq Cohen, it was his game last game. I think it's going to be Jordan Howard's game this week. He's going to catch some passes out of the backfield. It's a low over-under on this game, but I still think he's a safe running back. The big thing about Miami is they run the least plays out of anyone in the NFL, and that will also hurt Chicago. But I think Mitch Trubisky has to maybe start keeping the defense a little more honest. Jordan Howard used to run with some of the most stacked boxes, maybe behind Leonard Fournette from last year, but not too far behind him. So I think that opens up, if Trubisky actually takes a step forward, that opens up more opportunities for Jordan Howard to produce. I think he's still going to be a running back 1 by the end of the season. So I think this is a bounce back game for Howard.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I hope Tariq Cohen isn't as involved as some people think that he will be, but it'd be nice to see Jordan Howard be a bigger piece of that I guess developing Chicago Bears offense.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Taylor,
All right, I'm going with Chris Thompson.
your
for
boy,
running back.
your
Yeah.
boy.
He started off the season, his first 2 weeks, pretty solid. His second week especially, ended up with 92 yards receiving and not too much rushing. But I mean, with Adrian Peterson picking up a lot of the workload, that was kind of be expected that his role would take a bit of a hit. Now, Peterson is dealing with a few injuries, including his dislocated shoulder from last week. But he's expected to play, but I would think that Washington would be looking to go pretty heavy on Chris Thompson. I mean, he's always been a solid running back, but he's also that double threat for receiving too. So he'll be looking to make a bounce back after last 2 weeks, which weren't very great.
Yeah, the 92 yards he had in week 2, he had 14 targets, 13 receptions, and 14 targets is out of the norm for him, but he is seeing 7-8 targets per game, and an average about 6 rushing attempts. So if Peterson steps back and Thompson is allowed to get a couple more touches in the run game, but also be involved like he usually is in the passing game, I could definitely see a narrative where he is overused, just like maybe James White and Tevin Coleman will be.
Mm-hmm.
So now Chris Thompson's listed at a game time decision. Do you expect him to play?
I
do, yeah, absolutely.
You both expect them to play, and I think he's in the same boat as Adrian Peterson. So obviously monitor the health of both guys, and that Carolina defense, they've given up a little bit, but they're not a slouch. But they're
not that stingy though.
No, I think you're right. It should be.
If Chris Thompson and Adrian Peterson are both out, then the Redskins are dead.
Oh, yeah.
It's nothing.
You're right.
At the wide receiver position, I'm going to go with a guy that most people are completely down and depressed about, but it's Doug Baldwin, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, it's
great pick.
Listen, last week, if you want to call it, I'm going to call it a smoke screen. It blinds you from the potential upside and value that Doug Baldwin actually possesses. Right now, you see him as a guy that is struggling with injuries, that knee injuries, got bone on bone happening. No involvement in the offense last week. 1 target for 1 reception for 1 yard. The trifecta, 1-1-1. And Tyler Lockett is completely outperforming him when he's on the field. But listen, Doug Baldwin is Russell Wilson's guy, right? Let's not forget that. This is, like you said, Landon, a get-right game for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks, and he's not going to be able to do it without his primary target, Doug Baldwin. So they're going across the pond, games that usually score, higher points. It's just that's what you expect when you go to Wembley. The Raiders have given up 85 or more yards to 8 receivers this season, and I think that you can add 1 more to that list with Doug Baldwin this week for number 9. So I'm projecting a big bounce back week for Doug Baldwin. He needs to get back into that wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside role that he is so deserving of. And, I think after this week, he'll no longer qualify for a start of the week candidate.
I love that pick. I completely agree. I want to, if you can afford to see it first out of Doug Baldwin, I don't blame you, but he's a great DFS play, and you might be out of luck. So I think our listeners, just hear your vote of confidence, should feel comfortable starting Dougie. So
Dougie B.
My start of the week is Sammy Watkins. It has to do with that high over-under in the New England game. And even against Jacksonville last week, he had a good game. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions for 78 yards. He's really only down week besides, so week 1 against the Chargers was down, and then he went out with a hamstring injury against Denver. And I was concerned to start him against Jacksonville. He got the bad matchup and the hamstring concerns, but I think it's all systems go against New England. And no issues. Start your Sammy Watkins if you have him.
My bold prediction of the week, Sammy Watkins outperforms Tyreek Hill by a mile.
Love it. Let's keep it
Taylor,
going.
speak to us on your boy here.
Oh, I've mentioned him a couple of times. I mean, he's a pretty obvious start, but I'm going with Tyler Boyd. That almost 300-yard a game being allowed for passing by Pittsburgh is just too big to ignore for me, and I think Tyler Boyd's just going to come out and get mad points because of that.
Had 3 games in and around or over 100. I think he had the 92-yard game, but then 2 over 100, 100 and 132. So certainly got the capability. If AJ Green gets locked down or they double him, then Tyler Boyd's going to be a perfect option for him. And piggybacking on that same sort of thought process at the tight end position, I'm going to go with CJ Uzama. And Taylor's like, who? Who are you? What? Who is this guy? He's been a younger player that Dalton has come to love. They're starting to develop some chemistry, and it's the same sort of thing you're seeing with Tyler Boyd. A bigger body guy. He's fairly sure-handed. Pittsburgh D is second worst against the tight end this year so far, allowing 415 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and averaging 85 yards per game against the tight end. So I think when you factor in how bad Pittsburgh is and how Dalton is starting to target and frequent CJ Uzama more in this passing offense, I like his chances of being a fantasy relevant option this week in this matchup.
I like that. My tight end start of the week is Cameron Brate. Now, interesting news. OJ Howard had a full practice on, so I think it was Friday, full practice. So,
which doesn't make sense for his injury.
No. And
he had a strained MCL, and usually people are out for a lot longer than a couple weeks, but he did practice in full.
I still don't think he's going to play. I don't
think he plays either. So
with that, what we know about Jameis Winston is he loves his tight ends, and particularly Cameron Brate. So I think he's going to hyper target Brate. They have a great relationship, and that's what I'm basing this start of the week on. He's going to be chalk in most DFS lineups this week, because mostly because the big guys aren't even in it.
Right.
If you're in the Millionaire Maker, Gronk, Ertz, Kelsey are not in that lineup. So the highest price tight end is Eric Ebron. So a lot of people obviously aren't super confident with Ebron, so they'll go to a guy like Brate. So if it does turn out that OJ Howard does play, I would say my start of the week would be even riskier with Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end
goodness,
Arizona, and put up an absolute donut last week. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend. You probably don't. He's almost on everyone's waiver wire because he put up a 0 last week. But against Minnesota, their linebackers are not great at covering tight ends. So I think with the excellent corners that they have, and I think Ricky Seals-Jones gets an uptick in targets, and it's very risky. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it myself, but just keep an eye, and if you can watch the game, check it out and see how if Rosen looks at Ricky at all.
Now, Taylor's start of the week at tight end is interesting. So tell us about it, and then I've got a little exercise to go along with it.
So I'm kind of almost in the same situation. We're not 100% sure. It's Greg Olsen. We're not sure 100% he's going to start. Now, if he does start and play, I think he has the potential for a big game, because look at who you have to deal with already on that offense. You have to worry about Christian McCaffrey, who's a beast. You're worrying about
Devin Funchess
catching the ball, and you have Cam Newton, who likes to keep the ball and run himself. So, I mean, Greg Olsen's still dealing with a foot injury, which could end up being re-injured if he played again.
There's always that concern, right?
Yeah.
That chance that he re-injures.
But he probably won't be getting covered as hard as he normally would be if he was fully healthy. So that could leave the opportunity for him to see end zone balls or third down balls, because he won't be the main concern.
Right. Do you second that opinion, Landon?
I don't. I think he's still going to be covered just as hard as anyone else. He's not game planned for, I think, is kind of what probably Taylor means to say. I'm not starting Greg Olsen myself. I have to wait and see the nature of his injury. If you look up the info on Yahoo, it basically says exactly what I'm thinking. His injury just has such a high risk of re-injury. Mm-hmm. He's probable to play, so he'll be. I think he's almost a trap play, to be honest. If he plays and has a good game, then it's full systems go. Start him every week, because we know Cam likes Greg Olsen.
But here's the thing: how gross is the tight end position right now?
You're right. I agree.
What do you really have to lose?
Yeah,
you know that he could be a top 5 guy on a regular week. Without question, right? Yep. So if he's going to play, you have to assume he's healthy enough to play, or else he wouldn't. So if Greg Olsen's on the field, I feel like you almost have to start him.
Yeah, I've got no shares of Greg Olsen, so maybe that's why I'm concerned. But
I just picked him up off the waiver wire.
So
earlier this week, that's
a great pickup.
Yeah, his share's gone up 40% this week. And so, those that were paying attention got Greg Olsen right away when we mentioned him on the Tuesday show, the waiver show. I think that he has top 5 upside, especially with how much Cam Newton loves him. Now, what I want to ask you is, what's your temperature check on Greg Olsen? So I'm gonna say Greg Olsen or X, player X, and I want Taylor to give me his first, and then Landon, you can say your pick second, and we'll just rapid fire through them.
Cool.
If someone besides Greg Olsen,
I'd
go Eric Ebron, just because Hilton's out again and he's proven that he can pick up the slack. So even though everyone's going to know that that's probably going to be Luck's first target, maybe second at the worst, I still think he's going to perform well. So
okay, so Greg Olsen or David Njoku?
Njoku. It's all dependent on if Greg Olsen is up to he's starting probably, but
Landon?
Yep, no Njoku.
Greg Olsen or Kyle Rudolph?
Probably Rudolph. Just because, the Vikings need to kind of step it up a little bit, and he can be a big part of that.
Yep, I'd go Rudy too.
Trey Burton or Greg Olsen?
I'm going to go with Olsen just because I like him, and I think if he does play, he will do well.
I'll go Burton.
Okay. Greg Olsen or Eric Ebron? We know where Taylor stands. Do you like Ebron, Landon?
Yep, I'm Ebron for sure.
Greg Olsen or Cameron Brate?
I'll go with Brate. Landon made good points on him.
Yeah, if OJ's out, I'm going Brate.
I would be going Olsen for the record. And Greg Olsen or Jimmy Graham?
Jimmy Graham has been a huge letdown for me this year because he's just not utilized as much, which we know because Aaron Rodgers doesn't really use the tight end as much. But I go Greg Olsen this just because of mainly that reason.
I think this could be a get right game for Jimmy against the poor San Francisco defense. I think he finds the end zone this week. I think Greg could also find the end zone. I might project Greg for 3 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown.
That's enough to be a tight end one.
That's probably more than Jimmy Graham's going to get.
There's only two guys from that list that I would start over Greg Olsen. It'd be Jimmy Graham and Kyle Rudolph. That's it.
Oh, well. So you have him pretty high.
Yeah, I do.
Is he a zero or a hero?
Okay, we have a new segment to end out the podcast today. It's called Zero or Hero, and these are players that are probably on your bench as of right now, and we see them as complete boom or bust plays. They're either going to give you a potential week-winning performance, or they're going to give you a good old Timbit, a zero on your lineup. So an interesting play. If you're going to choose one of these guys to play, you have to be okay with the potential of them giving you nothing. So,
this could be based on your week. So if you're playing against a guy like Saquon Barkley, who just put up 30 some points on you, and
you got to go for the fences.
You go for the boom play.
Right.
If you're playing against Little Beckham Jr., don't start these guys.
Yeah, go safe, right? If someone underperformed, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So for me, I picked this guy up earlier in the week when I mentioned him on the waiver shows, and I said, go out and get Ronald Jones II, Tampa Bay's rookie running back who was sat for the first 3 weeks of the season. Week 4, out-touched Peyton Barber. Okay, in week 5, 10-3. Now, that workload is still up for grabs. It's not set in stone that Ronald Jones is going to get all the work. Peyton Barber will probably be involved. Jacquizz Rodgers probably be involved in the passing game. But there's a good chance with this game script that Ronald Jones gets into the end zone. That, for certain, I think could happen. It's a really good possibility. Maybe even twice. And even if he got his 10 for 30 and 2 touchdowns, that could be a week-winning performance that you picked up off the waiver wire. So with the game script, I could see Ronald Jones getting his first ever touchdown in his career, but I could also see the Bucs getting their first rushing touchdown of the season. And so with the game script and potentially the upward in trend for him, I could see Ronald Jones having a good game. In the other capacity, I could see him sitting on the bench and having no role at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but it's a play where there could be maximum upside.
Yeah, the one thing I'll mention about Atlanta is they give up the most points to passing running backs of any team.
Correct.
So now that is not necessarily what Ronald Jones does well.
Mm-mm.
But I'm not to say they're exceptionally good against the run either way. It's just saying that Jacquizz Rodgers, or he might be more involved and get more. He might be more of a boom play as well in that game.
Who do you want to speak to, Landon?
So I'll go with the guy we talked about a little bit earlier, and that's Chris Hogan. He's had a bunch of bust games, and it's really sad to see. But if you're going for the fences, why not have a pass catcher for Tom Brady, the GOAT of quarterbacks? And just because he hasn't done anything so far doesn't mean the reverse can happen. Like a guy like Robbie Anderson, who's he's a perfect example of a zero or hero guy, and he was dropped in most leagues and then has 3 catches for 130 yards or whatever it was last week. But Chris Hogan, we know he has the ability because he did it last year. It's just for whatever reason, we're not really sure why. We can't explain why Tom Brady's just not targeting him. If they had a good week of practice this week and they saw good chemistry, and the Chiefs scheme for Gronk and double team him, and I mean, I guess every defense does that every week anyways. I don't know. It's gross because there's so many more pass catchers now with Edelman back and Gordon in the mix, but he is a boom play. He could get 2 or 3 touchdowns just because of the nature of that game. That's why he would be my zero or hero.
Yeah, it's an interesting play. I mean, it's not one that I would endorse, but I get what you're saying. And, you know, if you reference back to what I said like a half an hour ago about that offense and about Chris Hogan, it totally makes sense. It's just he's not going to be a popular play, but if you're really desperate because of how good the offense is, it might not be a bad play. But you have to understand, if Chris Hogan gives you 0 points, you can't be disappointed, because that's the whole point of this segment. It's to put you on to Chris Hogan to say he might get 20 or he might get 0, and you have to live with either. Yeah, it's not a bad pick. I do like it. Mm-hmm. Taylor, you're going audible on this one. Last minute switch.
I am. I originally had Greg Olson, but since I put him in my start of the week,
we don't want to beat a dead horse here.
I'm gonna switch it up and go with Mike Davis.
Who?
Yeah, he has carved out a spot in the Seattle run game.
Yes.
He had that one game, 21 rushes, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns in week 4. Crazy. Obviously, you're not going to expect that kind of production every week, especially when he's sharing the backfield with Carson. Rashad Penny's not really getting any time or runs at all.
That's a good point.
Mike Davis has proven the last 2 weeks at least that he can be a RB1 potentially, and I think his last week is probably more what you should expect. 68 yards on 12 rushing attempts, 1 touchdown. He's probably going to end up being a pretty touchdown-dependent running back when it comes to points. But he's being used the last 2 weeks at least and shown that he can do it. So,
and I notice he's on your team.
He is. He's actually on my team in both leagues. I picked him up and managed to grab him both times.
In the last day, his stock has risen 16% up to 35% owned, but he is still available in 65% of leagues. So Taylor makes a really good point. He's touchdown dependent. If Seattle can move the ball, I could see him vulturing a couple touchdowns. But just seeing that, he can have a game with 21 carries if need be, if something happens to Carson, or the game script just dictates he's the better option. It's nice to see that he can do something with the carries and be efficient. In his 2 games with substantial workload, averaging 4.8 and 5.7 a carry on more than 10 touches. So it's nice to see that, and he scored in the last 2 games, right? So I think that's a great play.
Yeah, I still prefer the Carson start. He had 12 carries last week. Carson had 19. Now, Davis did have the goal line work, obviously, so that's where his upside lies, and that's where I agree with you. And Carson was out the game where he got 21 against Arizona, against a putrid Arizona defense. But yeah, it's definitely, I can agree that it's definitely not Rashad Penny, I'll tell you that.
Who's got the biggest chance to be a 0 here between Chris Hogan, Ronald Jones, and Mike Davis?
Probably Chris Hogan.
I'm going to say Chris Hogan, too.
Yeah.
Who's got the biggest chance to be a hero? Ronald Jones or Mike Davis?
Jones.
I think Davis, because I think there's too many weapons on Tampa Bay's offense to hope that Jones is the one that makes it. I mean, I'd be nice because I have him on my team, but I
also want to kind of go Davis.
I think the competition for Davis is worse than Jones. That's where I'm going. I think at least I think Ronald Jones gets the opportunity to get that work where I guess you have Penny and Carson that is a little bit hard, more difficult to overcome for Davis. But it's who knows.
Who knows?
We'll
find out.
Segment. I think there's tons of players here that are very boomer bust, 0 or hero. There's tons of them that we could spend all day talking about players that have let us down one week and gotten 20 something points the next. So
well, 1 apiece is good.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. We hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I want to say a special thanks to Taylor for coming on and offering another voice and perspective, because I know it can get a little bit, you might get sick of me and Landon all the time.
It was nice to be on. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. Join us on our Sleeper channel. You can follow the link in the episode description. We do a live Ask Me or Ask Us Anything on Sunday morning. So tomorrow morning, you can jump on with us 11:30 till 1 p.m. And we stop right at game time. And we just, help you handle some start sits, some weather questions, some DFS plays. We're basically there to try our best to help you with what you are facing going into the week. So Landon and I will be there. Taylor usually stops by at some point. So drop by, say hi, and ask a question, leave us a beer.
Cool. Yeah. Have a good Saturday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have fun slinging that pasta, son.
Thanks.
All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Mac_SMS and Landon_SMS. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/SaturdayMorningSnap.